Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master. Welcome to my Neptunia character reference guide. In this guide I take a look at some of the characters that are in this game and talk about what they're supposed to be referencing and talk about what I think about their references. Now I won't call this a complete reference guide because the Neptunia games when they are at their best are just so chock full of references, and V2 is easily the best of them that I've played so far. If you have any references or things you want to add, feel free to leave a comment down below. Also, I won't talk about characters that have been introduced in other games. We all know what these four represent and what the CPU candidates are. Even I figured it out, even though I really haven't played the second game in the series, so I don't want to waste anyone's time on information every video like this has done. So let's get down and start looking at some of the new characters and jokes and references they are being made with them. And yes, a bit of a plot spoiler warning. I'll try not to ruin the ending, but I can't talk about the very first character that is introduced without getting into a few of the game's plot twists, unfortunately. So, plot spoiler warning is in effect. Yeah, let's start with the new character the game centers around, Uzume, and what does she represent? She represents the Sega Dreamcast, and to be honest, I never owned a Dreamcast, so I'm not sure of all the references they make with her. But I do know my history, and I know what they were trying to do with her. Anyways, her weapons of choice is the megaphone, and her CPU personality are all based on a character named Ulala that was the star of a very popular Dreamcast music game. I believe it was like Space Station 7, I'm not quite sure of the title. But anyways, the watch she wears is some sort of device that went into the controller. Again, not really ever owning or using the console. I'm never quite sure what it was for exactly, if it was a memory card or if it did something else. But I can tell you that's definitely what it's supposed to represent. Another cool fact is when she transforms, that watch becomes the lid to the Dreamcast. Now that tie has a swirl on it that's very similar to the Dreamcast logo, which was also kind of this whirlpool swirl. It's also why her fallen personality states that she wants to drown the world in a whirlpool of delusion. And finally, another reference to the Dreamcast is both her and her dark personality can control and manipulate dreams, with Uzume's power having anything she dreams up eventually coming true, and her dark personality being able to manipulate people through their dreams. And now for a few plot spoilers on her background. Her whole being banished from hyperdimension, creating this ruined zero dimension, has some real life parallels to the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was a short-lived console that ended its life cycle early and by all accounts was an absolute failure of a console. So in the game, she is now a failed goddess that got sealed away because of that. Her being forgotten in the story could easily be said that the Dreamcast was quickly forgotten when the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox came along. And why is Zero Dimension such a mess? To many people, the failure of the Dreamcast and Sega dropping out was an end of an era, so why not have the world she now lives in be post-apocalyptic? As far as why her dark side is so delusional, the sad fact of the matter is the Dreamcast should have been able to compete with its rivals. Although I have never played one, but like I said, unlike most consoles that have failed miserably, where people talk about the one good game that console might have, and generally tell people outside of it now being a collector's item, they wish they never bought the thing. The Dreamcast, on the other hand, those who owned most of them still keep them and have great things to say about it. It had support and plenty of games, and it had ideas and thinking that it was ahead of its time. So why did it fail? Well, Sega was hit hard with the colossal screw-up that was the Saturn, and they really didn't have any business trying to launch another console. They couldn't afford the manufacturing or to market it like they should have. When Sony announced the PS2 pretty much at the same time the Dreamcast was launched, and with Microsoft also getting into the race, the writing was on the wall that the Dreamcast was finished before it had even really got started. Given the situation, it's easy to see why making this character so delusional with life also fits the Dreamcast. So what is with Uzume's sidekick Umio? Again, another game I have never played, and a game that does show what I mean by the Dreamcast was ahead of its time, was Seaman. It was a game where you talked to a fish man and he would speak back, and if you cared enough for him, he would evolve into different things. It was certainly a different game, giving the game reviews that I've seen, and I hear if you're the patient type, it's actually fun and quite novel. That said, I did play the N64 equivalent, which was Hey You Pikachu, and all I can say about that game is it well earned my nickname for it, which was F-U Pikachu. So for the Sega fans, I hope their microphone worked a lot better than the N64's did. Anyways, the deep voice and the weird face that creeps people out are all direct references to that game, including a scene which involves him evolving and growing a pair of legs. Before I can start talking about the 4 antagonists during the second arc, which turn into 4 protagonists during the final arc, let's talk about this guy, Zolange. Although a very minor character with just a side quest that he gives out, I have to say this guy is probably one of my favorite references and some of the most biting satire this game has to offer. So what exactly is he? What does he represent? Well, he's the AAA industry and their business model. He's an old man who's greedy, abusive to his employees to the point where they run away from him and become monsters. He's also willing to lie to his employees, to his customers, and to his investors. And while I didn't complete all his quests because they're a bit on the grind side, I did bother looking on the internet all the conversations Neptune has with them, and what he turns out to be is actually a senile old man whose time has come and gone. What a perfect way to beat up this model that is starting to grow so thin with gamers. And this game came out in 2016, before the Star Wars fiasco, before the NBA 2K18 fiasco, before the Shadows of War came out. Idea Factory predicted that some of these business models would finally reach the public and there would be backlash. And whoever wrote this deserves a raise because it's really good. Okay, turning from the first arc of the game, let's get to the second arc, the Hyperdimension and Gold Third arc. So who is Gold Third and what do they represent and why do they call themselves Gold Third when they're 4 members? Are they just doing a joke where these people are too stupid to count? Nope, that third stands for third party, as they all represent major third party companies. B-Sha is Bandai Namco, C-Sha is Capcom, S-Sha and her second personality E-Sha represents Square Enix, and finally K-Sha represents Metal Gear Solid. I mean Metal Gear. No, I mean Konami. Anyways, I should note that before we begin, the countries they take over have meaning, as these third-party companies have favored those systems. For example, Konami gave the PS3 its first big system seller exclusive with Metal Gear Solid 4. Capcom supported the Wii U long after every other developer had pretty much bailed on that sinking ship. And as for Square Enix, although pretty much Sony-oriented for the last 20 years, they have helped Microsoft by going multi-platform with their Final Fantasy series and given a few exclusive to them as well, although most of them were by accident. And don't worry, Sony fanboys, you didn't miss much when your guys' version of this was canceled. Anyways, let's start talking about the characters that make up Gold Third. We'll start with B-Sha since she is connected to Neptune's story. Although B-Sha is technically Bandai Namco, her references are more on the Bandai side than the Namco side. Not that Namco is forgotten, far from it. Her color scheme is very similar to the scheme used in a lot of Namco games back in the day, particularly Pac-Man, and when she gets greedy, her eyes go to a shape that resembles Pac-Man. But aside from that, we get more Bandai references. A lot of her abilities that you can use in combat have to do with the Gundam series, Her transformations kind of resemble a Gundam mech, and she can even summon a robot that is as close as possible to being a Gundam without being sued for copyright infringement for one of her attacks. Her greedy nature is kind of a stab at how Bandai Namco chooses to operate their mobile games, and having played a few of them, I kind of agree with those jabs. I know mobile games are supposed to be based around microtransactions and asking for money, but Bandai Namco's mobile games can take it a little too far. Still better than EA, but not by much. As far as her Presto Mask alter ego, at first I thought they were going with just poking fun at Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon. Dopey mask that really doesn't hide her identity at all, followed by long monologues that confuse villains into thinking that she's crazy. It's right up there with skewering Sailor Moon as a whole. But that's not the whole point of it. You see, her mask is based off the Bandai Presto logo, and they were a group that used to exist within Bandai that made a lot of the old Gundam games before they were eventually absorbed into Bandai as a whole. So that's kind of what they're poking fun of, and yeah, they're still kind of making fun of Tuxedo Mask too. Overall, I enjoyed the character. Her references in the English version were a bit obscure. I did have to do a little looking to understand some of them. Also not helping is the English translation, as they actually have her spout the Konami code before she takes her turn.
Up, up, down, down.
Why? That really should be K-Sha's thing, and K-Sha could use some general Konami references, but I'll leave that disappointment of a character for last. And sorry, Tales fans, no references for you when it comes for her. But we do get a game over screen that references the Tales series directly, so Neptunia as a whole didn't forget about the Tales of series. C-Sha being Capcom was a character I did enjoy, but not my favorite of Goldthird to talk about, but one that was still done right. Her main digs are on Monster Hunter, a series I haven't played, but although things like her having to use a licensed hunter or wanting to hunt monster and everything else is obviously related to that series. But not just all of it is Monster Hunter. We see her things like Pick Locks, obviously a reference to Jill Valentine from Resident Evil. Speaking of Resident Evil, her body also secretes a fog that creates monsters, is one of the things that happens during Blanc part of the story. Obviously it's a reference to probably the bio monsters from Resident Evil. And then let's talk about Capcom's fighting games. All of her moves are based on Street Fighter, as is the design of her costume. Her EX move is also very Street Fighter-esque. That said, Idea Factory did give several loving nods to the Mega Man series. Her costume is blue, obviously representing the Blue Bomber, but one of her special moves is called the Sea Buster, which is a reference to the Mega Buster. Not only does she state her goal of wiping out the Mavericks sometimes before blasting things, we also see her do a slide similar to Mega Man, and then she teleports away Mega Man style at the end of it. Her gold form is also awesome, growing huge bat wings. At first I thought they were doing ghouls and ghosts, but she also removes her hat, and with the costume being what it was and somewhat revealing, it dawned on me she is supposed to be referencing Morgan from the Darkstalkers. C-Sha is a great character, and I loved her references, and they took as much as they could from Capcom to create her. Not my favorite character to geek out over, though. That character would be S-Sha. It's hard for me not to put her in the party when she becomes playable. I'm a big fan of classic Final Fantasy and a huge fan of Kingdom Hearts, so it'd be hard for me not to like this character. Okay, her overall personality is obviously a ripoff of Squall Leonard with a little bit of Cloud Strife sprinkled in. Her costume is heavily based on Squall Leonard from Final Fantasy VIII. Her hair color and overall face resemble Pain from Final Fantasy X-2. Her weapons all reference either Final Fantasy or even Kingdom Hearts. Her zipper kinda looks a bit like the Kingdom Key from Kingdom Hearts. Her backstory is as goofy as it is, not only takes a jab at Squaresoft for making the epic failure of a movie that was Final Fantasy Spirits Within, but also does a Kingdom Hearts reference on top of that, as S-Sha and E-Sha soul sharing is similar to Sora in Ventus's dilemma. The fact that she believes she has to exercise E-Sha's soul or both will meet their doom parallels one of the stories in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. Oh, and let's talk about some of her special moves and transformations. Her two special moves both reference Dragon Quest game, with the second one going so far as to reference the monster recruiting and even the game's overall battle screen. Her main EXE move, Omni Slice, though, is a reference to Omni Slash from Final Fantasy VII, and when she's transformed, she even references Meteor by, well, dropping a large meteor on the enemies. As for the transformations themselves, her transformation represents both Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest all in one go. Her one wing is a reference to Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, although that is more of his Kingdom Hearts version. Her crown is referencing the crown Sora can unlock in Kingdom Hearts 2, and that sword she has is very similar to Edric's sword. And I haven't even gotten to some of her quotes. Her quotes of "I'll never be a memory" is a reference to Sephiroth's last word in Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, where he tells Cloud he will never be just a memory. One of her victories quote is, "This is my story," a reference to Final Fantasy X Oran. S-Sha is a good job just nailing and parodying the company she represents, as well as their major RPG franchises. Good going on her. It's too bad I can't say the same thing about the next one. Oh god, the next character I have to talk about sucks. Saving the worst for last. I hate K-Sha. It's not that she's really that annoying. It's not that she's a yandere with a thing for noir, which actually I thought was funny as hell. If there was ever a company that deserved to be compared to a yandere, it's freaking Konami. No, I hate K-Sha because Konami is a game company that has done a lot for the industry and has had a lot of great franchises in the past that were quite popular. Castlevania, Gradius, and Contra are some of the most prolific game series in the industry and beloved by a lot of old school gamers. Do we get any of these references to go with her? The answer is hell no. It's all Metal Gear. That's all she is here to parody, is just Metal Gear. I give them credit for having the old logo of them on her dress, and I guess that dress does look just a little bit like Maria's from Symphony of the Night, but that's the only Castlevania reference I found with her. A game series that went on for 25 years and had something like over 30 entries, and you couldn't find something more to parody off of it? Meanwhile, I do get some of the Metal Gear jokes, at least, not having really played the series outside of the 15 minutes of Revengeance that I spent on it, and I get the idea that she's kind of parodying Raiden's Jack the Ripper personality, and I get the hat that she wears when she's transformed. I did see the main trailer for one of the Smash Brothers games that Snake appeared in, so I get that. But you know what? Metal Gear Solid is hard to understand when you're only relying on wikis. And no, I'm not angry they chose to do a lot of Metal Gear jokes with her. I'm angry that outside of a Twin B special attack, that's all they chose to do with her, is nothing but Metal Gear. With C-Sha, we got jokes based off of all kinds of Capcom games. With S-Sha, several of their hit franchises were referenced. Why just do one beat with this character? It's a complete waste. Moving on. Okay, one of the main villains in the Gold Third arc, Afimojas. He stands for Affiliated Marketing. Basically, he's a reference to things like web banners and ads that go on websites. Ever fell for a clickbait article on Facebook and were sent to a site that had 3 words of actual text that had you actually came from, but the rest of the page had about 20 ads? Thank this guy for it. Now that I think about it, he really is evil. Mess him up, Neptune! Mess him up good! As far as his sidekick Steam Max, I couldn't get any references from him. At first I thought of Steam as the platform that is used to sell video games, but I didn't notice any links or anything that could really solidly point to that outside of his name. So I don't quite get what they're trying to do with that character, where he comes from. He might just be a goofy ninja for the sake of being a goofy ninja. Okay, next I'll be talking about the main character's new transformations that are based on next generation hardware. I'll be talking about 3 of them. Sorry Neptune, you're not based on a real game console, so I can skip you. And besides that, other than a brief Tron reference during your transformation scene, there's not much to talk about with you. So moving on, let's talk about the 2 that did a really good job referencing their next generation counterparts, and then I will talk about Blonde and why her design is actually technically a failure. It's still a good design overall, and I like the look. Out of all the transformations, I think Noir screams the PlayStation 4 the most. This kind of Borg look, but at the same time it has a more blue hue, and we even see the blue hue coming out of certain parts. This is a reference to the light that's on the PS4 controller. Add in a headset that a lot of gamers wear to play games online, especially using the sharing service that I see on the PS4, and there's even a nice shout out to the PS4 logo during the transformation scene as well. Changed just a little bit to say last station, of course, but it's a really good job just referencing the PS4 and kind of giving her that look. I like it better than her original Blackheart look trying to reference the PS3. Vert's new transformation also does a good job showcasing and even poking fun of the Xbox One. Vert's original design was to poke fun of American otakus along with the Xbox, but her main reason her transformation leaves her with little clothing was poking fun of the Xbox 360's ability to overheat. What the new console means they can't parody that anymore, so she gets a transformation with a little bit more clothing. This time it's huge and bulky and looks almost tank-like. You can even see some of the vents of the Xbox One on her legs, and it's just bulky, which the original model of the Xbox One certainly was. I own one. It's the size of a 1980s VCR. Also love the nod to the original Xbox logo during her transformation. When it comes to Blonde, I don't even know if the Switch was even really announced yet when this game was released. Nonetheless, when the game was in development and the characters had to be designed. And with the Wii U being a failure and only really a small step up, I don't blame them for going back to the original Wii with her new transformation and her look. And I love the reference to the Wii Shell controllers, making her look more like a Nintendo character with the ponytails and the Pokemon hat, and the fact that her new look like she really is now encased in a Wii Shell. What got the biggest laugh out of me, however, is her ultimate move in this form summons a giant Wii Zapper. Yes, that is a Wii Zapper. She even has to put in a Wii remote in order to fire it. Well, this fails to represent the Wii U or the Nintendo Switch, having a send-up of all the plastic shells that the Wii had, and the fact that this design they chose really does a good job representing the Wii. I can say I'll give Idea Factory a pass on her design. Well guys, this wraps it up for the characters. I will be doing another list of just some one-liners and other references the game has in another video. If you have any comments or anything to add, feel free to leave a comment below. I will see you guys later.